Good morning, fifth graders. Hopefully today is Monday, possibly Tuesday, April 20th or 21st. I'm going to start like I do every day by looking at our assignments. So if everyone can get out their assignment sheet. And we're going to just start by marking and checking things off. So our first thing we're going to do today, you should have already worked on your check your progress to review your multiplication standards from last week. And then also a few of you still need to complete your Khan Academy assignments, so please make sure you're completing those as well. And again, you can just do the unit test. It's about 10 questions, or if you want to work on the quizzes, which are 4 to 7 questions to see what lessons you might need to review, you're welcome to do that, and you can take the assessment multiple times. The assessment for Khan Academy and Edulastic is really where I'm getting the majority of your scores. All right, so we are on Monday, April 20th. I'm going to mark off. We're going to start by using our fraction tiles. Then we're going to move into some guided and independent practice on dividing fractions. This is lesson 9, page 759 and 762. And then you guys have also had your ERQ questions from last week that you've been continuing to work on. These are your ERQ questions 3 through 8. And I'll post a video later in the week that kind of helps you out a little bit with those as well if you need a little more assistance. All right, so in our first introduction video, I asked you guys to color and cut out your strips. They don't need to be cut into little tiny pieces. You can just use them whole like I have. That seemed to be the best way. So if you haven't already cut and colored these, go ahead and pause and do that now. So we're going to start with how in the world do you divide fractions? And that's our standard, dividing fractions. So a fraction by a fraction and a whole number by a fraction and a fraction by a whole number. So it's kind of 3 different parts. And it's really hard because when you're dividing fractions by fractions, it's kind of counterintuitive. You're dividing bits by bits and counting the new bits. So we're going to start by just doing a few, and I'm going to show you with the fraction tiles, and if you can use your fraction tiles to do it while I do it. And then I'm also going to be showing you the math, just like I always do. So if you're doing guided notes, just like we do in class, you can just get out your paper, and I sent extra paper home with everyone, and you can be using that to write down your problems, or you can just follow along with me and then wait till we get to our textbook work. So let's start by first one. So everyone find your whole. And if I was going to divide a whole by a third. So everyone find your third fraction tiles. And you're going to line it up with your whole. And how many thirds do you have? 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to come and show you the math. We have a whole divided by a third. And there's a phrase that I'm going to be saying over and over and over again for the next 5 days. You know how I am. I'd like to teach you a phrase because then you hear it in your head whenever you get to these problems. Our phrase is going to be flip and multiply. Flip and multiply. So the one you're going to flip is your second number. Now, when we're working with fractions, how do we write a fraction if we have a whole number? What do we put in our denominator? Yep, a 1. Any number over 1 is that number. And we're going to flip, and then we're going to change our division to multiplication. Now, what are our steps for multiplying fractions? Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. All right, 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 1 is 1. And of course, 3 over 1, how do we write that as a whole number? 3. So if I cut my whole into 1/3 parts, I end up getting 3 pieces. Now what if I cut my whole into 1/5 parts? How many pieces do you get? 5. So 1 divided by 1/5. And we're going to flip and multiply. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. I get 5 pieces. All right. What if I was dividing my whole into 1/8 parts? Hopefully you're starting to see a pattern. 1/8 parts. How many pieces do I get? What's our phrase? Say it in your head or say it out loud. Flip and multiply. 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 1 is 1. And 8 wholes is 8. All right, so now what happens, we only have 1 whole, but I want you to go back to your third. If I had 2 of these wholes, how many 1/3 strips would I end up getting? How many thirds would that be? So I need 2 of these. All right, we're going to do it with our math. 2 divided into 1/3 parts. Flip and multiply. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 1 is 1. We would get 6. All right, so our 5th piece. Everyone find your 5th strip again. If I had 2 holes cut into 5ths, how many would I have? Okay, say it for me. What do we do? Flip and multiply. 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 1 is 1, which is 10 holes. Okay, think in your head now, what if we had 3 holes and we were cutting them into 5ths? Say your phrase. Flip. Now the key here, the number one mistake, is that people flip the first number. So remember, this is division, so it's just like saying 3 divided by 5th. And all we're doing with division is making equal groups of a 5th. All right, so flip and multiply. 3 times 5 is 15. 1 times 1 is 1, which is 15 holes. Okay, now if you notice something, all of our dividends were whole numbers, and all of our divisors are fractions. But what happens if we're going to cut it by other fractions? So this is the problem we're going to do. We're going to do 1/2 divided by 4ths. Okay, so everyone find your halves. So we're not looking at wholes anymore because we're cutting halves. Now we're really only going to cut 1/2. So I'm going to go ahead and fold my half. And we're dividing it into 4th pieces. So how many 4th pieces does it take to make our half? All right, so we're going to do it with our math. We flip and multiply. 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2. How can I reduce this? 2. I get 2 1/4 pieces for every half. Now, this is the last one we're going to do today because these are the tougher ones and they're a little harder conceptually. We're going to do more of these tomorrow. But I want to show you where we're going. Can you divide a smaller piece by a bigger piece? And you actually can. You can actually do that. So I want to do, what if we had a 4th cut in a half? A 4th put in half groups. Now we don't even have enough. We don't have enough to make a whole half. So this is where we're going to go tomorrow to give you a little bit of a preview. If I have a 4th, so now I'm going to fold my little strips into 4ths. And I need to know how much of a half I could get out of my 4th. So think about that for a minute. How much of a half can I make in a group if I only start with a 4th? All right, so same thing. Flip and multiply. 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 1 is 4. Reduce. If I cut my 4th and try to make halves, I only have enough to make a half of a half. All right, so that's really where we're going to go tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it. If you want to safely put your strips away, because we're going to need these for the next few days, and we're going to be drawing. You can either use your strips, or if you want to use them for the next activity, you're welcome to use them as well. Or you can just draw. Sometimes I find that it's easier just to draw. But I'm going to pause because we're almost at the end of our time. And if you can make sure that you have your Lesson 9 activity ready to go, that'll be our next video.